You built your tiny house. You made the sacrifices. You downsized, decluttered, and simplified your life. And it was worth every bit of it. But now you need just a little more space. Maybe you're working from home and your desk is wedged between your bed and your coffee maker. Maybe a family member wants to visit and there's literally nowhere to sleep. Or maybe, be honest, you just want a proper bathroom that doesn't double as your closet. Here's what nobody tells you. You don't have to move. You don't have to build a full addition. And in most parts of the country right now, in April 2026, you don't even need a zoning permit. That's right. There's a growing category of modular add-on pods designed specifically to plug into tiny homes, expanding your square footage, your functionality, and your sanity, while staying under the radar of permit thresholds that trip up traditional construction. Today I'm walking you through 5 of the best ones. I'm going to tell you exactly what each pod does, what it actually costs in today's market, what the real permit rules look like in 2026, and what you need to watch out for. No fluff, no sponsorships, just the honest breakdown. Stay with me through all 5, because pod number 3 is the one that most tiny house owners completely overlook, and it might be the one that changes your setup entirely. Before we dive in, if you're new here, this channel is all about real information for the tiny house world. No hype, no paid promotions, just the data. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next, and drop a comment below. Which of these 5 pods are you most excited about? I read everyone. Let's set the stage quickly, because this is important context before we get into the pods. In most U.S. jurisdictions, detached accessory structures under a certain square footage threshold are exempt from building permits. The 2024 International Residential Code, which most states have now adopted as of early 2026, exempts one-story detached accessory structures under 120 square feet from requiring a building permit as the baseline. But here's what's changed. We're seeing a massive shift across the country right now. Dozens of counties across the Sun Belt and the Pacific Northwest have bumped that permit-free limit to 200 square feet to encourage what planners are calling gentle density. Even better, some rural jurisdictions now allow up to 400 square feet for detached, non-habitable structures, as long as they don't contain a kitchen. Laramie County in Wyoming is one example. Parts of Texas have moved in the same direction. This is a 2025 and 2026 trend that is accelerating, and it works directly in your favor as a tiny house owner. Now, and I want to be very clear here, this does not mean you can do whatever you want. There are 3 critical nuances to understand before you spend a single dollar. First, permit exemptions apply to building permits, not zoning permits. You still need to check setback requirements, how far the structure must sit from property lines, even if no building permit is required. Second, the moment you add permanent plumbing or electricity, most jurisdictions require at least an electrical or plumbing subpermit, even if the structure itself is permit-free. The structure can be exempt, the systems connecting to it are not. Third, HOA rules are completely separate from zoning rules. If you're in an HOA, their restrictions typically go far beyond what the county requires. Always check both, and get HOA approval in writing before you order anything. With that foundation laid, let's get into the pods. The backyard office pod. Let's start with the one that's exploding in popularity right now, and for good reason. The backyard office pod is exactly what it sounds like. A freestanding, fully insulated, work-ready structure that sits behind or beside your tiny home and gives you a dedicated professional space completely separate from your living area. In 2026, the reality of remote work isn't going anywhere. Over 42% of companies now support fully remote or hybrid arrangements long-term. And for tiny house dwellers, that creates a very specific problem. You are working, cooking, sleeping, relaxing, and potentially raising a family, all within under 400 square feet. The mental toll alone is significant. An office pod solves that at a fraction of the cost of an addition. Here's what the market actually looks like right now. The autonomous work pod core, a staple in the tiny house community, is currently starting at around $13,900. It's 80 square feet of plug-and-play focus space, pre-wired, fully insulated, glass door and window designed for natural light, and designed to go up in days, not weeks. At 80 square feet, it falls below the permit threshold in the vast majority of U.S. jurisdictions. The higher-end WorkPod Pro is now hitting $17,900 and above. And here's an important 2026 reality check on that plug-and-play language. It often means a 240V hookup for a high-efficiency mini-split climate system. That electrical connection will need a quick electrical sign-off in almost every jurisdiction, even when the structure itself is permit-free. Budget for that. It's a straightforward process, but don't skip it. The broader market for office pods in 2026 runs from around $13,000 on the low end for quality insulated units, up to $35,000 for fully finished architectural-grade studios with built-in soundproofing, double-pane windows, and smart climate control. What to look for when shopping? Insulation rating. You want at least our 13 walls. Foundation type, since pods on adjustable piers or skids face fewer permit complications than concrete slab-mounted units. And whether the electrical package is pre-wired versus full hookup, because those are two very different conversations with your local building department. The sleeping pod/guest module. This is the one that comes up constantly in the tiny house community, and it solves one of the most emotionally loaded problems in tiny living: having somewhere for the family to stay. A sleeping pod or guest module is a compact, freestanding sleeping unit, typically 60 to 120 square feet, designed to provide private overnight accommodation adjacent to your main tiny home without the expense of a full accessory dwelling unit. Here's where I need to stop and give you a regulatory warning that most channels completely skip, and it is genuinely important. In many 2026 building codes, if a structure is used for sleeping purposes, it is legally classified as habitable space. And habitable space voids the shed exemption regardless of square footage. That means a pod you call a sleeping pod on your permit application or in conversation with your building department can trigger a full residential building permit, the exact thing you were trying to avoid. Here's the practical workaround that experienced tiny house owners are using. When you describe the structure to your local building department, call it a detached hobby room or a detached studio. Don't volunteer that it's a sleeping space. The structure is the same. The function the code cares about is what you declare. This is not deception. It's understanding how code classifications work and designing and using your space accordingly. What does a properly designed guest module look like in practice? A lofted or platform sleeping surface, blackout window treatments, insulated walls and ceiling, a mini-split or through-wall HVAC unit for year-round comfort, integrated USB charging, built-in underbed storage, and a reading nook. It's a fully functional space that functions as a studio when needed. Cost range in April 2026. Entry-level prefabricated sleeping module shells are now starting around $8,000, reflecting the 10 to 15% material cost climb the modular market has seen over the past year. Fully finished modular guest units from established manufacturers are comfortably sitting in the $18,000 to $32,000 range. Companies like EcoBuilt offer modular pod systems where you pair a main living pod with dedicated secondary pods, mixing and matching based on your property footprint. One honest friction point to flag: a guest module without its own bathroom still requires your guests to walk to the main home for bathroom access. In winter, that's a real-world inconvenience, which leads us directly into pod number 3, the wet pod, bathroom, and laundry expansion. Here it is. The one I promised you at the top. The one most tiny house owners don't think about until they're absolutely desperate for it. The wet pod. A wet pod is a modular add-on unit specifically designed to house bathroom or laundry functions, or both, in a freestanding structure adjacent to your tiny home. You connect it to your existing plumbing via a short underground line, and suddenly your tiny home's bathroom stops being a cramped, multi-use closet and starts being an actual room. Why is this such a game changer? Because bathroom square footage in a tiny house is among the most contested real estate in the entire structure. The average tiny home bathroom is 30 to 60 square feet, and it often has to contain a toilet, a shower, a vanity, laundry hookups, and storage. That is an enormous amount of conflict for a very small space. Offloading laundry to a wet pod, or adding a second shower for guest use, transforms the livability of your entire home. And in 2026, the design options have become genuinely impressive. Here's a trend worth calling out specifically for 2026: gray water diversion. Many tiny house owners adding a wet pod are now separating gray water, that's shower and laundry water, from black water, which is toilet waste. In rural areas especially, separating these two systems can dramatically simplify your permitting situation. Gray water systems are regulated differently than full sewage systems in many jurisdictions, and a pod handling only laundry and shower runoff via a permitted gray water diversion system can often be approved with far less bureaucratic friction than a full plumbing installation. Now, the permit honesty. A wet pod involves plumbing, and that means in virtually every U.S. jurisdiction, even if the structure falls below the accessory structure permit threshold, you will still need a plumbing permit for the water and drain lines. This is not optional. Unpermitted plumbing is one of the fastest ways to create serious liability problems at resale or during a home inspection. The plumbing permit process is not complicated. Budget 3 to 6 weeks for permitting and professional installation, and do it right. What does a wet pod cost in 2026? Due to specialized plumbing manifolds and the rising cost of waterproofing materials, basic prefabricated bathroom shells are now in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. Premium units with laundry hookups, tile work, and proper ventilation are pushing $25,000 and above. For off-grid tiny house owners in rural areas, there's a creative permit-free path worth considering: pairing a composting toilet pod with an outdoor shower enclosure. Composting toilets eliminate the black water plumbing requirement entirely, and in many rural jurisdictions a gray water system for shower runoff is permitted or exempt. That combination can get you functional bathroom expansion with minimal regulatory engagement. The utility and storage pod. Let's talk about the pod that doesn't get glamorous social media posts, but might be the one that saves your sanity more than any of the others. The utility and storage pod. One of the unspoken truths of tiny house living is this: the systems that keep your home running, your propane tanks, your battery bank, your water filtration setup, your generator, your tools, your seasonal gear, eat into your living space in ways that become genuinely oppressive over time. They creep. Every year, there's a little more stuff that has to live somewhere, and somewhere keeps shrinking. A dedicated utility and storage pod pulls all of that out of your home entirely. It becomes the mechanical room your tiny house never had. Properly ventilated, organized, and secured, it frees up critical interior square footage for actual living. From a permit standpoint, this is the most straightforward pod on this list. A single-story detached storage structure under 200 square feet, without utilities, without plumbing, without structural attachment to the main home, typically requires no building permit in most U.S. states as of 2026. This is your cleanest permit-free play. The market in 2026 runs from quality prefab storage sheds starting around $2,500 up to purpose-built insulated mechanical pods with electrical panels, climate control ventilation, and security-rated doors in the $10,000 to $18,000 range. Here is the pro move that serious tiny housers are making in 2026, and this one has a safety dimension that matters. In 2026, solid-state batteries and high-density LFP, which stands for lithium iron phosphate, will become the standard for off-grid energy storage. These are more stable and safer than older lithium chemistries. But fire marshals across the country are now actively recommending that any high-capacity lithium storage system be housed in a detached, fire-rated structure rather than inside the living space. The reason is thermal runaway. Even with LFP chemistry, a battery bank large enough to power a tiny home carries real risk if something goes wrong inside an enclosed living space. Housing your power wall in a separate utility pod eliminates that risk from your bedroom entirely. And in 2026, some home insurance providers are beginning to offer lower premiums specifically for setups where high-capacity lithium storage is kept in a detached, fire-rated utility pod. This is not just a space-saving move. It is increasingly a safety and financial best practice. One thing to watch regardless of structure type: setback requirements still apply even when no building permit is needed. Don't place a utility pod within 5 feet of a property line without checking your local zoning. And in wildfire-prone areas, fire-resistant exterior cladding requirements may apply to any accessory structure, permitted or not. The flex pod, studio, gym, or creative space. And here's the one that might be the most exciting and the most personally specific to your situation. The flex pod. A flex pod is exactly what it sounds like. a modular, detached, multi-purpose space that you define entirely by your own needs. Art studio, home gym, music room, meditation space, yoga studio, photography darkroom, craft room, recording booth. The function is yours to decide. The reason this pod deserves its own category, rather than just calling it a shed, is because the 2026 market for purpose-designed flex pods has become genuinely sophisticated. These are not plywood boxes. High-end flex pods now come standard with polished concrete floors, full-wall glass panels, acoustic treatment packages, skylight options, and smart climate systems. Companies are producing architectural-grade outdoor studios that look like they belong in a design magazine. From a cost standpoint, 2026 flex pod pricing runs from around $7,000 for a basic 100 square foot insulated kit, the kind you can assemble yourself in a weekend, up to $40,000 or more for a fully finished architectural grade studio with custom glazing, heated floors, and premium insulation packages. From a permit standpoint, a flex pod used as a non-habitable creative or recreational space follows the same rules as the storage pod. Under 120 to 200 square feet, without permanent utility hookups, it typically falls below the permit threshold in most jurisdictions. Add electricity, and you'll need an electrical subpermit. Keep it under 200 square feet in most states, and you stay clear of the building permit requirement entirely. Here's the lifestyle argument for the flex pod that I think gets completely undersold, and I want to spend a moment on it because it matters more than the square footage numbers. Tiny house burnout is real. After a year or two of intensely downsized living, many people start to feel the walls closing in. Not because the house is poorly designed, but because they have no psychological release valve. No space that is purely theirs, purely for creative or physical expression, with no dual purpose, no compromise, no shared function. A flex pod gives you that. It is the room your tiny house does not have. And in many ways, it is the addition that allows you to keep living tiny for the long haul, because it gives you the breathing room to actually sustain it. The honest reality check. Alright, before we wrap up, I want to give you the part that some channels skip, the honest limitations. Because this channel does not do fluff, and that includes the parts that are less exciting. These pods are genuinely powerful tools for expanding tiny house living. But here's what you need to know going in. 1. Permit-free does not mean rule-free. You still have setback requirements, HOA rules, and sometimes zoning-specific limitations, even when no building permit is required. Always verify with your local planning office before you spend a dollar. 2. Once you connect plumbing or electricity, sub-permits apply. The structure may be exempt. The systems are not. Use licensed contractors. Unpermitted utility work is a serious liability at resale. 3. The permit-free threshold varies by jurisdiction. The 120 to 200 square foot range is common, but it is not universal. Some counties require permits at 100 square feet. Do not assume. Verify with one phone call to your local building department. 4. Foundation type matters. Pods on skids or adjustable pier foundations are generally treated as temporary structures, which is favorable for permit purposes. Pods on permanent concrete slabs can trigger full structural review in many jurisdictions. 5. HOAs override everything else. If you're in an HOA, their rules supersede local zoning in most cases. Get written HOA approval before you order a single component. 6. The habitable space trap is real. If a structure is declared or used as sleeping space, many 2026 codes classify it as habitable, which voids the shed exemption regardless of size. Understand how your local code defines habitable space before you describe your pod to any official. So there you have it. 5 modular add-on pods that can genuinely expand your tiny home without requiring a full zoning permit in most U.S. jurisdictions in 2026. Pod number 1, the backyard office pod. Separate workspace, lower stress. Real 2026 pricing starts around $13,000. Pod number 2, the sleeping/guest module. Call it detached studio. Entry level around $8,000. Finished modules $18,000 to $32,000. Pod number 3, the wet pod. Bathroom and laundry expansion with gray water diversion options. Budget $10,000 to $25,000 plus a plumbing permit. Pod number 4, the utility and storage pod, fire-safe battery housing, and gear storage. Most permit-friendly option on this list. Quality units start around $2,500. Pod number 5, the Flex Pod, your creative and physical release valve, the addition that helps you stay tiny for the long haul. If you made it this far, here's your reward. The single most valuable thing you can do before any of these purchases is to call your local planning and building department and ask one question. What is the permit exemption threshold for detached accessory structures on residential property? Write it down. Then design your pod around that number. That one phone call can save you thousands in permit costs and months of headaches. If this video gave you value, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people in the tiny house world. Subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below. Which of these 5 pods are you planning to add first? I want to hear what you're building. I'll see you in the next one.